Hello everybody. I don't usually make or post videos over a weekend, as I've made up my mind not to make the same mistake as a lot of other YouTubers and suffer from burnout within a month, 2 or 3. However, I thought this was interesting and that it shouldn't wait until it becomes old news. And it pertains to the 200 nearly British pound trip that Meghan and Harry took to South Africa. Now, right from the onset, I just want to tell you that I do not doubt the amount, that I don't think that Charles or the royal family were dishonest in giving us that amount. They have been doing annual reports of expenditure for hundreds of years, and I have never seen that people doubted the reports in any way. So I do believe that that was the amount that was spent on and during the trip. However, my biggest question is, how could it be? And the reason why I am asking how they could have spent that amount is because I'm aware that currently the exchange rate between British pounds and the South African rand is 21 rand equals 1 British pound, so it's 1 to 21. And I'm not sure about what the exchange rate was at the time of their visit, but I am aware that, say, for the past year, the exchange rate sort of hovered between 19 rand to the pound and 21 rand to the pound, in that region between those parameters. So I worked it out last night. If they had spent 250,000 British pounds on the trip and while they were here, that would equate over 5 million rand. And remember, while they were here, they were spending in rand. Okay? So I just went over their trip quickly. I didn't do an in-depth study because, as I said, this is a very impromptu video. And as far as I know, their first few days in Cape Town were spent at the British Embassy, or at least that's where they stayed. So there was no hotel rental for them per se during that time. However, I do believe that they had to accommodate their staff and their security, and quite possibly their staff and security, I'm not sure, but it's possible that they were accommodated elsewhere, possibly in a hotel. Now, my question would be, would they have accommodated them in like the presidential suite in one of the most expensive hotels in Cape Town? I sincerely doubt it. And even so, remember, they would have been paying like somewhere between 10 and 20,000 rand. And how much would that be? £1,000? So I cannot see that staff accommodation could have added significantly to this amount. Obviously it added, but not that significant. Not to bring the amount up to £250,000. But let's take staff accommodation into account. The staff, however, is on the payroll, so obviously that I couldn't see that being added to this £250,000 either, because they're on the payroll. However, they may have received what we call here in South Africa living out expenses, thus an extra bit for them to either spend on curios, foods, gifts, whatever. In any event, so accommodation and living out expenses, I cannot see that being a huge portion in pounds again of this 250,000. Okay. Harry possibly spent a night or two in fairly expensive accommodation when he was away from Meghan. I'm not sure where they stayed when they were in Johannesburg either. But still, no matter how much they spend on accommodation, I cannot see that making out more than a third of the 250,000. Then we look at Meghan's clothing. The clothing she wore in South Africa were actually a huge disappointment. and came relatively cheap. Yes, I went on Meghan's Mirror and it was cheap. I read the newspaper reports and page through magazines just like everybody else, and her clothes were cheap. So that could not have been more than, what, a tenth, maybe even less of the expenditure of their South African trip. Donations. I know about the colouring books and the crayons that they donated. Those, I'm sure, were donated to the royal couple before their visit. And even if they had actually bought it, I still cannot see that being that expensive. And then obviously there was Archie's second-hand clothing. Well, that didn't cost them any, did it? Maybe extra luggage, pound or two for extra luggage. That is, if they came to South Africa on a commercial flight, but let's assume they did. Okay, so donations. The only other donation I'm aware of was the donation to the Justice Desk, the place they visited, the first place they visited here in South Africa. But that donation, and I checked, came from the Commonwealth Trust. So that donation cannot be calculated as part of the cost of their trip. So there's that. So donations couldn't have made up a significant portion of that amount. So what could possibly have made up that amount? Security, they brought their own. Additional security was provided by the South African police and private security companies, which were paid for by the venues they attended. Then food. Well, food for them, they were mostly fed wherever they went, so I cannot see that costing much, if anything. Their staff, that would be part of their living out expenses, which they were probably paid before they came to South Africa. Yeah, so food's not an issue. What else? The Land Rovers. Well, from what I understand, the Land Rovers, whether they were flown in or shipped in, I'm not sure, those were brought here by Land Rover itself. And it was totally unnecessary because we do have Land Rovers in South Africa and they are being sold here. But most likely that was just a marketing exercise by Land Rover. So I cannot see the royal family or Charles or the Queen or whoever actually paying for those Land Rovers to have been brought to South Africa. Because if you remember, Diana visited South Africa and she didn't have vehicles shipped in for her. And she was adequately taken care of in South Africa as far as I know. And the Queen had visited South Africa, so even the Queen would be aware of our situation on the ground. And I never heard of any complaints from the Queen either about either security or food or accommodation or anything like that. So I would assume that both Diana and the Queen were both taken very good care of while they were here in South Africa and did not need any additional, be it whatever, accommodation, vehicles, whatever. Anyway, so that is that. Land Rovers, I don't think cost them anything. So how the heck did they manage to spend well over 5 million rand here in South Africa? How? I would like to see an itemized bill. Because you see, guys, I have a very sneaky suspicion. And then I must just reiterate that I am not accusing anybody, least of all Meghan and Harry, of what I'm going to say next. This is just my personal suspicion, my personal opinion, and I may be wrong, or I could even be proven wrong. But I have a sneaky suspicion that Meghan and Harry had been pilfering small amounts, relatively small amounts, maybe huge for you and me, but not for them, have been pilfering small amounts for a very, very long time. long before they stepped down as senior royals. And I think that they did not do this with huge amounts. I'm not talking about the 3 million Disney donation, which had gone totally AWOL. I'm not talking about amounts like that. I'm talking about relatively small amounts. £10,000, £20,000, £50,000 maximum. Amounts that could be easily covered up by these visits and trips. Okay? Amounts that would not necessarily be questioned by the royal family or their accountants. Amounts that they could easily verify, just, oh, well, we took so-and-so out for a private dinner or whatever, or we came across this poor person and we donated 10,000 to their plight or whatever, I don't know. But amounts that could have been covered up easily. So yeah, and then another thing which I think they may have spent money on while they were here would be something like crowdfunding, because what I have understood from a particular journalist was that they had a hard time to pull crowds together to pretend that they are waving and clapping and yelling out at Meghan and Harry, that they really suffered to get a significant crowd together. So maybe they spend a bit of money on crowdfunding, on obtaining like movie extras to come and clap and yell and take photographs. But even so, an extra on a movie set gets paid between, say, 200 and 300 Rand a day, which is what, £10? So even if they did that, it does not contribute largely to 250,000 British pounds, or it wouldn't. The other thing I think they may have spent money on was they most likely paid the bloke, oh, I can't remember his name, I never can. I always tend to remember after I finish the video. But they most likely paid the bloke who made that Poor Me video of theirs here in South Africa. But how much could they have paid him? £10,000, £15,000? What portion would that have been of the £250,000? I would like to know. But crowdfunding and paying for extras to come and wave and yell and clap, etc., and take photographs, and even this bloke making the video, I cannot see that making a huge portion of this £250,000 either. It may have made a relatively significant portion of the amount. Okay, so yeah, I have the sneaky suspicion that they have been putting small amounts like 10,000, 20,000, 50,000 pounds into their piggy bank and covered it up by these royal tours and visits. I may be wrong, and if I'm wrong, I apologize. But it just makes sense to me, because maybe that is how they could manage to just move into their new scenario in either Vancouver or California. Although Sugars and other people were talking about them being cash strapped or possibly broke, etc. They didn't seem to be. They seemed to just continue as per normal, and they stayed in expensive areas, and they were seen in Meghan in particular in expensive new clothing. So maybe, by covering 10 or 20,000 pounds here and there with an official visit, or other donations, that sounds almost possible and plausible to me. And that is what I suspect was done with the South African trip. As I said, maybe not, but I would like to see an itemized bill for this trip. And if I could also most likely debunk it. Alright people, now this is not a scripted video, and it was a spur of the moment thing, and I actually recorded it while I was doing other chores. So you may hear me swallowing my coffee or bumping into things, but I thought let me just get this out there for now. Next week I'll be bringing you some more serious videos, stuff that I didn't just record on the spur of the moment, and stuff that took me not just a day or two to research, but most likely a week or two. So I'm looking forward to bringing you those things. I need to do the narration on the one, need to add some more receipts, meaning photographs, to the other, etc. But I'm hoping to bring those to you during the course of next week. So I hope I see all of you back here again next week for some more serious discussions. And for now, I'm saying take good care of yourselves, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.